They say some stories never end. They just fade into legend, into rumor, into the kind of silence that speaks louder than any confession ever could. But what happens when that silence is finally broken? When the truth, or something close to it, emerges from the shadows after nearly 3 decades? If you're drawn to stories that refuse to let go, that keep pulling you back into the darkness searching for answers, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear is not folklore, it's not speculation. This is a true story, and it may be the closest we ever get to understanding what happened on a Las Vegas street corner on a September night in 1996. My name is Julian Cross, and tonight we open a file that the world thought might stay closed forever, the file of Tupac Shakur. Picture Las Vegas, September 7th, 1996. The desert heat has finally broken, giving way to that electric energy that only exists when the sun goes down and the city transforms into something else entirely. The Strip is alive with light, with noise, with the kind of crowds that come to witness spectacle. And on this particular night, spectacle is exactly what they got. At the MGM Grand Garden Arena, 25-year-old Tupac Shakur sits ringside for what everyone expects to be a major boxing event. Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon, heavyweight championship, the kind of fight that draws celebrities, high rollers, and anyone who wants to say they were there. Tupac isn't alone. Beside him sits Suge Knight, the imposing, controversial founder of Death Row Records. Knight is everything the music industry whispers about in back rooms: powerful, connected, dangerous. His label has become synonymous with West Coast hip-hop, and Tupac is his brightest star. The fight itself lasts less than 2 minutes. Tyson demolishes Seldon with a first-round knockout. It's almost anticlimactic. People barely have time to settle into their seats before it's over. But for Tupac and his entourage, the night is just beginning. They head to the casino floor. Tupac's fiancée, Keffe Jones, daughter of legendary producer Quincy Jones, is with them. The group is celebrating, moving through the MGM Grand with that particular energy that comes from being young, successful, and seemingly untouchable. It's approximately 8:50 in the evening when something shifts. Trevon Lane, a Death Row Records employee and member of the Mob Piru gang, a blood-affiliated gang from Compton, spots someone in the casino, someone who shouldn't be there, someone who represents a problem that's been festering for weeks. His name is Orlando Anderson, though most people know him as Baby Lane. He's 22 years old, a member of the Southside Compton Crips, and according to Lane, he's got something that doesn't belong to him. Weeks earlier, there had been an incident at a Foot Locker store in Lakewood, California. Anderson and his associates allegedly jumped Lane and stole a Death Row Records medallion, the kind of chain that signifies allegiance, that marks territory in a war most civilians don't even realize is being fought. In gang culture, this isn't just theft. It's disrespect, it's a challenge. Lane alerts Tupac. What happens next is captured on the MGM Grand surveillance cameras. Tupac approaches Anderson near the casino's entrance. The exact words exchanged are lost to history, but witnesses report Tupac asking Anderson if he's from the South, street code, a way of identifying gang affiliation. Then Tupac throws a punch. Within seconds, it's not a fight, it's a beating. Tupac's entire entourage, including Suge Knight himself, joins in. Anderson is outnumbered, overwhelmed, kicked and punched while security struggles to intervene. The assault is brutal and public, the kind of humiliation that in the world these men inhabit demands a response. When it's over, Anderson and his uncle, Duane Davis, a man known in Compton as Keffe D, leave the casino. They're angry, they're embarrassed, and according to what would later be revealed, they're already planning their retaliation. Tupac and his crew, meanwhile, head back to their hotel. The confrontation seems like just another night in the ongoing war between Bloods and Crips, between Death Row and anyone who crosses them. Just another chapter in a story that's been written in the streets of Los Angeles for decades. But this chapter is about to end differently than anyone expected. 3 hours pass. Tupac changes clothes. The group decides to head to Club 662, a nightclub Knight has ownership in. It's supposed to be a celebration, a night of music, of victory, of life lived at full volume. Tupac climbs into the passenger seat of Knight's black BMW 750 sedan. Knight takes the wheel. They're not alone on the road. A convoy of cars follows them, carrying members of their entourage. It's the kind of procession that turns heads, that announces presence. They're heading east on Flamingo Road, one of Las Vegas's main arteries, just a block from the Strip. At 11:15 p.m. they stop at a red light, the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Covell Lane. Traffic around them continues its normal flow. Tourists, locals, people living their ordinary Friday night, with no idea they're about to witness history. Tupac is standing up through the car's sunroof, talking to people in the cars around them. Music is playing. The night still feels full of possibility. Then a white Cadillac, 4 doors, unremarkable in every way, pulls up alongside the BMW on the passenger side, where Tupac is sitting. There's a moment, just a breath, where everything is still normal. And then the window comes down. More than a dozen shots shatter the night. The sound is deafening, unmistakable. A .40 caliber Glock semi-automatic pistol, fired at close range again and again and again. The kind of shooting that isn't meant to send a message. It's meant to end a life. Tupac is hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh. One of the bullets tears through his right lung. Suge Knight, massive and imposing even while seated, is grazed in the head by a bullet fragment, but remains conscious. The BMW is riddled with holes. The white Cadillac speeds away into the Las Vegas night, disappearing into traffic before anyone can process what just happened. Knight, despite being shot, makes a decision that will haunt the investigation for years. Instead of waiting for an ambulance, he drives. He makes a U-turn heading back toward Las Vegas Boulevard, leaving a trail of blood and shattered glass behind him. Police eventually stop him. Paramedics arrive. Tupac is rushed to University Medical Center. The damage is catastrophic. Doctors perform emergency surgery, removing his right lung in a desperate attempt to save his life. For 6 days, Tupac fights. His mother, Keffe Shakur, keeps vigil. The world waits. Hip-hop holds its breath. But on September 13, 1996, at 4:03 in the afternoon, Tupac Amaru Shakur is pronounced dead. Respiratory failure leading to cardiac arrest. He was 25 years old. And with his death, one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history begins. If stories like this pull at something in you, if you find yourself unable to look away from the questions that haunt our collective memory, leave a comment below. Tell me, what case has stayed with you? What truth are you still searching for? Because this community, we're all searching together. In the immediate aftermath, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police launch an investigation. They interview witnesses. They examine the bullet-riddled BMW. They review surveillance footage from the MGM Grand showing the earlier assault on Orlando Anderson. Anderson becomes an immediate person of interest. Police bring him in for questioning, but Anderson, following the code of the streets, says nothing of value. He denies involvement. He invokes his right to remain silent. And without physical evidence connecting him to the crime scene, without witnesses willing to testify, police have no choice but to let him go. The weapon, the .40 caliber Glock that ended Tupac's life, is never recovered. It disappears into the same shadows that swallowed the white Cadillac. In 1998, a .40 caliber Glock is found in a Compton neighborhood, and for a moment, investigators believe they might have found the missing piece, but ballistic testing reveals it's not a match. The actual weapon remains lost. This is where the case begins to fracture into theories, into speculation, into the kind of labyrinth that can trap an investigation for decades. Because Tupac Shakur wasn't just a rapper. He was a symbol. He was caught in the center of multiple conflicts, any one of which could have motivated his ending. There's the gang war, the most obvious motive. Tupac had publicly aligned himself with Suge Knight's Death Row Records, which had deep ties to the Mob Piru gang, a blood set from Compton. The assault on Orlando Anderson, a Crip, created a straightforward motive for retaliation. In gang culture, the mathematics are simple and brutal. You disrespect one of ours, we respond in kind. But then there's the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. By 1996, hip-hop had fractured along geographical lines in a way that seems almost surreal in retrospect. On one side, Death Row Records, representing the West Coast, led by Suge Knight, with Tupac as their fiercest voice. On the other, Bad Boy Records, representing the East Coast, led by Sean Diddy Combs with the Notorious B.I.G. as their champion. This wasn't just marketing, this was personal. November 1994. Tupac enters the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan. He's there to record with another artist, but before he can reach the studio, he's ambushed. 5 shots. He's hit in the hand, the groin, the thigh. He survives, but something else dies that night. His relationship with Biggie Smalls. Tupac becomes convinced, rightly or wrongly, that Biggie and Bad Boy Records were involved in setting him up. He notices that members of Biggie's crew were in the building. He believes they knew, and that belief transforms into fury, into paranoia, into an all-consuming need for retribution. After his release from prison in 1995, signed to Death Row Records, Tupac channels everything into his music. Hit 'Em Up becomes his weapon of choice. A track so aggressive, so personal, so vicious that it shocks even hip-hop veterans. He doesn't just attack Biggie's music, he attacks his character, his relationships, his manhood. He claims to have had relations with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. He threatens violence. He draws a line in the sand and dares anyone to cross it. The media amplifies every moment. MTV runs stories about the beef. Magazines force artists to take sides. Fans inherit the rivalry as though it's their own war to fight. The tension becomes so thick, so dangerous, that when Tupac is shot in Las Vegas, everyone's first instinct is to blame the East Coast. But as time passes, as investigators dig deeper, the East Coast-West Coast theory begins to seem less like motive and more like context. It created the environment, the hostility, the conditions under which violence became inevitable. But the actual trigger, that appears to be rooted in something older, something more local, gang retaliation. And yet, the theories don't stop there. Some point to Suge Knight himself. The theory goes like this. Tupac was planning to leave Death Row Records. He wanted to start his own label, to escape Knight's increasingly controlling grip. And Knight, who stood to lose his most valuable asset, decided that a dead Tupac was more profitable than a departed one. This theory gained traction in 2002, when filmmaker Nick Broomfield released his documentary Biggie and Tupac, which featured the work of former LAPD detective Russell Poole. Poole claimed that Knight had orchestrated both Tupac's ending and Biggie's, possibly with assistance from corrupt Los Angeles police officers who worked as death row security. But there's a problem with this theory. Knight was in the car, he was shot, granted only grazed, which conspiracy theorists seize upon as suspicious. But the logistics of orchestrating your own shooting while driving, ensuring you're only lightly wounded while your passenger is struck 4 times. It strains credibility. In 2017, another wrinkle emerged. Suge Knight, by then incarcerated on unrelated charges, claimed through his lawyer that he, not Tupac, was the intended target. He alleged that his ex-wife, Sharitha Golden, and Death Row's security chief, Reggie Wright Jr., had orchestrated the attack. Knight's theory was that they wanted him dead for financial reasons, and Tupac was simply collateral damage. Golden denied the accusations vehemently, pointing out that Tupac was the meal ticket for Death Row Records. Why would she want to eliminate the label's primary source of revenue? The theories multiply, each one more intricate than the last. Former detective Russell Poole developed an entire framework connecting Tupac's case to LAPD corruption, to officers David Mack and Rafael Perez, who were later exposed in the Rampart scandal. He believed that corrupt police working as security for Death Row Records had facilitated both Tupac's and Biggie's ends. Poole's investigations revealed genuine corruption within the LAPD. The Rampart scandal was real. Officers were stealing, dealing substances, framing suspects. But the connection to Tupac's case, it remains unproven, a web of associations and coincidences that never solidifies into evidence. And hovering over all of this is Sean Diddy Combs. Some theories suggest he ordered a hit on Tupac as part of the Coastal War. These theories would later be complicated by claims from Duane Davis himself, who in police interviews suggested that someone, allegedly Combs, had offered money for the hit. But the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has been clear. Combs has never been considered a suspect in the case and has never been charged in connection with Tupac's death. Combs has consistently denied any involvement. For 27 years, these theories circulate. They spawn books, documentaries, podcasts, endless online debates. Everyone has a theory, no one has proof. And then, in 2023, something changes. If you're still with me, if you're as captivated by this story as I am, do something for me. Share this video, send it to someone who remembers where they were when they heard Tupac had passed. Send it to someone who's too young to remember, but needs to understand why this case matters. Because some stories are too important to let fade away. The truth is, investigators had a confession all along. They just couldn't use it. Duane Davis, Keffe D, had been talking for years. In 2008, facing federal charges on unrelated matters, Davis sat down with law enforcement. He gave them details, names, a timeline, his role. In 2009, he did it again. According to Davis, he believed he had been granted immunity for these statements. He thought he was protected in exchange for information about other cases. Then, in 2019, Davis published a memoir, Compton Street Legend. In it, he didn't just hint at involvement. He provided a systematic account of what happened that night in Las Vegas. According to Davis's own words, after the assault at the MGM Grand, he and his nephew Orlando Anderson, along with associates including DeAndre Big Dre Smith and Terrence T. Brown Brown, got into a white Cadillac. Davis obtained a .40 caliber Glock. He handed it to his nephew in the back seat. They went looking. According to Davis, they received a tip about Tupac's location from someone in their crew who had been near the strip with women. That person made a U-turn to follow Tupac's BMW and then alerted Davis and the others. When they spotted the BMW at the red light at Flamingo and Koval, they made their move. Davis claims he was in the front passenger seat. He says that when they pulled alongside the BMW, Tupac made a sudden movement, reaching down beneath his seat. This prompted the shooting. Davis wrote that instead of a weapon, Tupac pulled out a straw, perhaps for a beverage, but by then it was too late. That's when the fireworks started, Davis wrote. One of my guys from the back seat grabbed the Glock and started busting back. Davis has given conflicting accounts about who actually pulled the trigger. In some versions, it was his nephew Orlando. In others, it was DeAndre Smith. The exact identity of the shooter shifts depending on when and to whom Davis is speaking. What remains consistent is Davis's admission that he orchestrated it. He provided the weapon. He was in the car. He was part of the plan. For years, law enforcement knew all of this, but there was a problem. Davis claimed immunity. And even if that immunity was questionable, his confessions existed in a legal gray area. Statements made during proffer agreements, negotiations with prosecutors, are often inadmissible in court. And statements made in a published memoir. Defense attorneys could argue those were made for entertainment purposes, exaggerated for book sales, not reliable confessions. But something shifted in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Perhaps it was the accumulation of Davis's public statements. Perhaps it was advances in how the legal system views conspiracy charges in gang cases. Perhaps it was simply that enough time had passed, enough evidence had been gathered, that prosecutors believed they could finally make a case. On July 18, 2023, police executed a search warrant at a home in Henderson, Nevada. The residence was associated with Davis's wife. They seized computers, cell phones, hard drives, .40 caliber cartridges, photographs, and copies of Davis's memoir. 2 months later, on September 29, 2023, 27 years and 16 days after Tupac's death, Duane Keffe D. Davis was arrested near his home in Henderson. A Nevada grand jury indicted him on 1 count, ending with a deadly weapon, not as the shooter, as the orchestrator. According to prosecutors, Davis was the on-ground, on-site commander who ordered the death of Shakur. Las Vegas Police Homicide Lieutenant Jason Johansson described him as the leader and shot caller who orchestrated the plan that was carried out. The arrest sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and true crime world alike. After nearly 3 decades, someone was finally being held accountable. Davis pleaded not guilty. The legal case against Duane Davis is both remarkably strong and frustratingly weak. Strong because Davis has confessed, multiple times. To police, in a book, in media interviews. He has provided details that only someone with direct knowledge could know. He has placed himself at the scene, admitted to providing the weapon, acknowledged his role in planning the retaliation. Weak because there's no physical evidence. The weapon was never found. The white Cadillac disappeared into history. The actual shooter, whether it was Orlando Anderson or DeAndre Smith, is dead. Anderson was taken out in an unrelated gang shooting in Compton on May 29, 1998. Smith's fate is less clear in public records, but he's not available to testify. Davis's defense team has built their strategy around several arguments. First, they claim Davis wasn't even in Las Vegas that night. They've presented testimony from a private investigator suggesting Davis was elsewhere. This directly contradicts Davis's own repeated claims, but it creates reasonable doubt. Second, they argue that any statements Davis made to law enforcement in 2008 and 2009 should be inadmissible because he was operating under an immunity agreement. If the prosecution can't use those statements, much of their case evaporates. Third, they contend that the memoir was written for entertainment and profit, not as a factual confession. This is a fascinating legal argument. Can someone confess to a serious crime in a published book and then claim it was all fabrication for commercial purposes? Fourth, they point to the 27-year delay. Why now? If prosecutors had enough evidence to charge Davis in 2023, did they have enough evidence years earlier? Does the delay violate Davis's constitutional rights? And fifth, perhaps most intriguingly, the defense has suggested that other individuals may bear actual responsibility. They've pointed specifically to Reggie Wright Jr., who was Death Row Records' security chief and has been the subject of various conspiracy theories over the years. Prosecutors, for their part, maintain that Davis's own words are sufficient. They argue that he confessed repeatedly, voluntarily, and with enough detail to establish his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. They note that in gang conspiracy cases, the person who orchestrates violence is just as culpable as the person who carries it out. You don't have to pull the trigger to be convicted of ending someone's life. The trial was originally scheduled for March 2025, but in February 2025, Davis's defense team filed a motion for postponement, citing the need to interview additional witnesses and conduct further investigation. The defense claimed to have identified new witnesses whose testimony might prove Davis's innocence or implicate other parties. The trial was rescheduled to February 9, 2026. In July 2025, Davis filed an appeal with the Nevada Supreme Court, seeking to have the charges dismissed entirely. His argument? The prosecution lacks sufficient physical evidence to proceed, and then, in January 2025, Davis faced an additional charge: battery by prisoner. Allegedly, while awaiting trial in the Clark County Detention Center, Davis got into a physical altercation with another inmate. It's a minor charge in the context of what he's already facing, but it adds another layer to an already complex case. As I record this, the case remains unresolved. Davis sits in custody. Lawyers file motions. The legal machinery grinds forward at its characteristic pace, maddeningly slow for those seeking justice, perhaps too fast for those seeking exoneration. There's another piece to this story, one that we can't ignore. 6 months after Tupac was shot, on March 9, 1997, Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, was leaving a party in Los Angeles after the Soul Train Music Awards. He was in a GMC Suburban, stopped at a red light on Wilshire Boulevard. Another vehicle pulled up alongside him. A shooter fired at least 5 rounds into the SUV. Biggie was hit 4 times. He died within an hour. The parallels are impossible to miss. 2 of hip-hop's biggest stars, both young, both at the height of their fame, both shot in drive-by attacks while stopped at traffic lights. Both cases remain officially unsolved. Some investigators believe the cases are connected. Las Vegas detective Clifford Mogg testified before a grand jury in 2023 that he believed the 2 cases were related and perpetrated by the same individuals. He didn't elaborate, and the exact nature of that connection remains unclear. The prevailing theory is retaliation, that Tupac's associates, or gang members connected to Death Row Records, targeted Biggie in response to Tupac's demise. An eye for an eye. The coastal war made flesh. But like Tupac's case, Biggie's ending has never been officially solved. No arrests, no convictions. Just theories and grief and a sense that justice, whatever that means, has never quite arrived. And this is where the story becomes about more than two men. It becomes about a culture, an era, a moment in American history when art and violence became so entangled that they couldn't be separated. Tupac Amaru Shakur was born in 1971 in East Harlem, New York. His mother, Afeni Sheker, was a member of the Black Panther Party. His name, Tupac Amaru, was taken from an 18th-century Peruvian revolutionary who led an indigenous uprising against Spanish colonizers. From birth, he carried the weight of rebellion, of revolution, of fighting against systems designed to crush him. His childhood was unstable. His family moved frequently. He experienced poverty, witnessed substance struggles, felt the constant pressure of survival in communities under siege. But he also received an education in arts, in theater, in poetry. He attended the Baltimore School for the Arts, where he studied acting, poetry, jazz, and ballet. He played roles in Shakespeare productions. He was by every account brilliant. That duality, the revolutionary poet and the street survivor, defined his entire career. His music reflected both sides. Songs like Brenda's Got a Baby and Keep Your Head Up showed empathy, social consciousness, a desire to illuminate the struggles of young black Americans in a country that seemed determined to ignore them. But songs like Hit 'Em Up and Hail Mary revealed rage, aggression, a willingness to embrace violence as both subject matter and method. He was complicated. He was contradictory. He contained multitudes. By 1996, Tupac had released 4 studio albums, sold millions of records, and established himself as one of the most important voices in hip-hop. He had also been shot before, survived a prison sentence, made enemies throughout the industry, and aligned himself with Suge Knight's Death Row Records, a label synonymous with both artistic triumph and alleged criminal activity. He was 25 years old when he passed. 25. An age when most people are just figuring out who they want to be. And yet, in 25 years, Tupac had already lived several lifetimes. His legacy is complicated too. Some see him as a prophet, a poet, a voice for the voiceless. Others see him as someone who glorified gang culture, who contributed to the violence that ultimately claimed him. Both views contain truth. Both miss the fuller picture. What's undeniable is the impact. In the nearly 30 years since his passing, Tupac has been the subject of countless documentaries, books, academic studies, and conspiracy theories. His music continues to sell. New generations discover him. His face adorns murals in cities around the world. He has become, in a sense, immortal, which is perhaps the cruelest irony of all. So where does this leave us? A man is in custody, charged with orchestrating one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. But as of this recording, there's been no trial, no verdict, no final resolution. Davis's trial in February 2026 will be closely watched. If convicted, he faces life in prison. If acquitted, the case may never see another arrest. The actual shooter is dead. The weapon is gone. The witnesses who could provide definitive testimony are either deceased, uncooperative, or compromised by the passage of time. Even if Davis is convicted, it won't answer all the questions. Was Diddy really involved in offering money for a hit, as Davis once claimed? Or was that a fabrication, an embellishment designed to make Davis seem more connected, more important than he was? Did Suge Knight know retaliation was coming? Was Biggie's ending truly connected? A cycle of gang violence that consumed 2 of hip-hop's brightest lights? We may never know. And perhaps that's the real story here. Not just what happened on September 7th, 1996, but what it represents. The failure of systems, legal, social, cultural, to protect young black men caught between art and violence. The way gang culture and entertainment industry glamour became so intertwined that people couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The cost of rivalry, of ego, of refusing to walk away when walking away might save your life. Tupac's mother, Keffe Shakur, spent years after her son's passing fighting to preserve his legacy, to ensure his music and message survived. She established foundations, released posthumous albums, gave interviews about the son she raised and the man he became. She passed away in 2016, never seeing anyone arrested for her son's ending. Kidada Jones, Tupac's fiancée, rarely speaks publicly about that night. The trauma of losing someone you love in such a violent, sudden way doesn't fade with time. It just becomes something you carry. And the hip-hop community? It learned its lessons the hard way. The coastal rivalry that seemed so important, so worth fighting over in 1996, is now viewed as a cautionary tale. Artists from different coasts collaborate freely. The idea that geography should determine friendship or enmity seems absurd in retrospect. But the gang violence that actually took Tupac's life, that hasn't gone anywhere. It continues in Compton, in South Central, in communities across America where young men are still choosing between colors, still settling scores with weapons, still dying over disrespect and territory, and ancient feuds that no one can quite remember how they started. Every town keeps a secret. Some just bury it deeper than others. Las Vegas buried this one for 27 years. And even now, with an arrest made, with a trial pending, the full truth remains elusive. We have confessions, but confessions can be unreliable. We have theories, but theories aren't evidence. We have a legal system attempting to deliver justice 3 decades late, which raises its own questions about what justice even means at this point. If Duane Davis is convicted, will it bring closure? Will it answer the questions that have haunted hip-hop culture for a generation? Or will it just be another chapter in a story that refuses to end? I don't have those answers. Neither do the prosecutors. Neither, perhaps, does Davis himself. What I do know is this. Tupac Shakur was a human being, not a legend, not a symbol, not a martyr or a saint or a cautionary tale. He was a 25-year-old man with dreams and flaws and contradictions, who created art that moved millions and made choices that led him to a Las Vegas intersection on a September night. He deserved better than what he got. His family deserved better. The community that loved him deserved better. Whether they'll get it depends on a jury that hasn't been selected yet, reviewing evidence from a night most of them probably don't remember, trying to determine guilt or innocence in a case that has become so layered with mythology that finding the truth underneath may be impossible. The trial will happen. A verdict will be reached. And then we'll know if this file can finally be closed, or if it's destined to remain open unresolved, haunting us the way some stories always will. Until then, all we can do is wait and remember, and ask ourselves what kind of world creates these conditions, where talent and violence coexist so easily, where a young man can be both poet and warrior, both artist and casualty. If this story has stayed with you, if you find yourself still thinking about it hours or days from now, I'd ask you to do one thing: subscribe to this channel, not because I need the numbers, but because stories like this, stories that refuse easy answers, that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about culture and violence and justice, these stories need to be told. They need to be preserved. They need to be passed down. The Midnight File exists because some cases won't let us go. They pull at us. They demand our attention. They insist that we remember. And Tupac Shakur, whatever else he was, whatever mistakes he made, whatever legacy he left, deserves to be remembered, not just as a face on a t-shirt or a voice on a track, but as a human being whose story is still being written, even now, even all these years later. The file remains open. The questions remain unanswered. And somewhere, in the space between what we know and what we'll never know, the truth waits. My name is Julian Cross. Thank you for listening. And remember, the next file may be darker still.